Wake Up to Money with Sean Farrington and Louise Cooper.
After reports that Tesco could be cutting thousands of jobs to save money on their meat, fish, even bakery counters, the supermarket has said it is continuing to simplify how customers are served. What does that mean? What does that mean for us customers as well? We'll have a look. So what are Tesco thinking? You know, all that time they've been trying to win business from the independents on the high street, and now they're closing potentially those meat, fish counters. Steve Jones is a former Tesco buyer and now works with retailers and suppliers as managing director of negotiationexpert.co.uk. Morning, Steve.
Morning, Sean.
So what is Tesco's thinking here? Because at some point they clearly thought this stuff works. Do they now?
Well, I think the problem is they've got a big hole in their expected profits, and they're just looking at anything that they can possibly do to drive down costs. I think Mr. Lewis took home 4.9 million last year, and really I think he seems a bit short of ideas.
So I thought Tesco's market share relative to the other three, they'd actually been managing to fight back against Aldi and Lidl. You're suggesting they're not?
No, I mean, they're fighting back, but they can't carry on dumbing it down forever. I mean, anybody can cut costs, can't they? Anybody can just go in and cut costs. And if you look at, I've forgotten what the lady who wrote in said to you, but I've forgotten her name. If you look at the biggest threat to retailers, it's the internet. And Tesco launched their Tesco Direct, and then they shut it down. And if you look at what happened when Terry Leahy was running Tesco, whenever they did anything, they did it properly, they executed it well. Some they stayed in, some they came out. But I can't help thinking that the Direct was the biggest potential competitor to Amazon, and what happened is they executed it badly and then said it was a bad idea.
We've got Thomas Moore still with us. He's investment director in UK equities at Aberdeen Standard Investments. Thomas, on Tesco, what is it that investors are looking at? Do you want them cutting costs, or do you want them investing and making more money from their counters?
Shareholders will be putting pressure on them to grow their profit margins, Sean. That's the key, and that's ultimately why they're doing this, because their profit margins have been too low. They dipped down below 2%, and there wasn't enough comfort in that profit margin for shareholders.
Isn't the plan, Steve, though, that he's cutting costs to, as he calls it, reinvest in the business so that he can cut the prices of key products? And I think they've been pretty successful at cutting prices in order to compete against Aldi and Lidl. So cutting costs to cut prices to lure consumers back in. I'm pretty sure that's Dave Lewis's plan. I've watched a lot of his presentations that's what he's saying he's trying to do. It's like this cycle: cut costs, cut prices, get consumers back in, grow the business again.
Well, I mean, if you can only differentiate on price, then they're never going to beat Aldi and Lidl, are they? If you look at the things he's actually stripped out, they had the brand guarantee, which gave consumers some comfort that they were buying products competitively rather than in the sort of the high-low environment. They've cut back on their club card deals. You can't get club card deals virtually anywhere in store on promotion anymore. And if you look at their club card boosts, for instance, if you had a quid in club card vouchers, you could get £4 off at Pizza Express.
But Steve, before Christmas, Tesco were one of the ones that seemed to have had a good increase in sales. Seem to have brought customers back, at least getting people spending more than they had the year before.
Well, not relative to the discounters.
Well, I mean, we don't know the exact like-for-like figures with the discounters, do we? They've increased a lot of stores at the minute. They're going to increase their sales if they're going to open loads more stores. It's not quite clear how much, if at all, the discounters are outperforming Tesco when it comes to sales, is it?
Well, all the rumblings were their like-for-likes, right, but you're quite right, they weren't published, so it is hard to tell.
Going back to Thomas, what's the city's impression of what Dave Lewis is up to? I thought, shareholders quite liked what he's doing.
Yeah, I think he's hit the ground running. He's a sort of nuts and bolts guy, so that's what the city wanted after that period of change. They'd been all over the place on their strategy, as we've discussed, in and out of Tesco Direct. They bought Dobby's, the garden centre chain, they sold that, and now they've got to knuckle down and really it is about cost. And I did that comment just now about nobody can beat Aldi and Lidl. Well, look, Tesco have got roughly 30% of the market. They should be able to take Aldi and Lidl on. Look at that buying power. And look at Sainsbury's and Asda if they get together. You know, those two chains have got enough volume that they should have the best buying power, the lowest unit costs. So actually, what they're doing is they're trying to arrest the growth of Aldi and Lidl, and they've noticed that people are shopping differently and that they're moving away from these big stores, and they've got to be able to get down the cost curve down to so that their unit costs are lower, and they can still then maintain their profit margins.
Ian Golding is still listening in, Professor of Globalisation at University of Oxford, former Vice President of the World Bank, advisor to Nelson Mandela at some point, but also, Ian, we're all shoppers. Whatever your CV is, but when you look at it with both of those eyes, what is going on with the retail world at the minute, do you think?
I think it's right that the forces of automation and artificial intelligence are going to change us in really fundamental ways over the coming years. And what we're seeing is just the beginning of this process. So everything we see on the high street now will be done differently in the future, including retail shopping and food shopping. And I think what we're seeing is just the beginning of that war. What goes online will become bigger and bigger. It'll be delivered quicker. It'll be delivered more effectively. The big online distributors will know much more about our preferences and be marketing us things. So I think this is really, amongst other things, about technological change, and it's only going to accelerate.
I've got a cheeky question for Steve. When we talk about Tesco going down the cost curve, if you're working with suppliers, that means yet more pressure on suppliers. So are you being quite critical because the businesses that pay you money to advise them are actually being squeezed hard by Tesco?
Oh, that's very, very harsh. I don't think I think it's always been like that.
Got to ask the difficult questions, Steve.
Well,
that's what I'm paid to do.
Well, indeed. It's always been like that. That will never go away. I think part of the trouble is if you look at the argument for increasing the... sorry, it sounds like I'm breaking these teeth in for a lunatic, doesn't it? I think that pressure will never go away, and it's always been there. And I don't think it's just Tesco. I think all of the other retailers are putting the same pressure on, and I don't think that will stop.
But do you think, I mean, Morrison's, for example, have made a big thing about their counters, haven't they? In the last few years, it's been part of their regeneration. Is it all going to go one way, or are we going to have very different looking supermarkets at some point?
Well, if you look at, there are only two competitive advantages, aren't there? Cost leadership, a differentiation. And if Tesco start to strip out the things that make them different to Aldi and Lidl, all that's going to happen is that people are going to go to the place that's the cheapest.
Well, the big difference is Aldi and Lidl don't deliver. That is a massive, massive, massive difference. And they don't have everything that you need. So you go to them for like the basics that are cheap, but then you might have to go to Tesco if you're gluten-free or lactose-free or you've got some special recipe that just they don't have the ingredients in Aldi and Lidl.
Well, Aldi do deliver. I just don't think they deliver food. And so
deliver to your home. They don't do online.
They do home delivery.
Well, not for food, I don't think, do they? I think
you
can buy the stuff in the middle aisle that nobody really knows what to call it. But
and I must confess, I bought a case of wine from Aldi as well, so they deliver wine as well.
Gotcha, so they got wine in there. So they may be looking to expand all that. Steve, thank you very much. Some interesting thoughts there. Steve Jones, Managing Director of negotiationexpert.co.uk. Thanks as well to Ian Golding from University of Oxford, former Vice President of the World Bank. Thanks to Thomas Moore from Aberdeen Standard Investments. Mark, I think, sums this up, Louise. Mark from near Taunton. He says, shopping habits. Lidl is next to Tesco in Taunton. Majority of my shopping done in Lidl. Top up in Tesco.
Yeah.
You go all the way to Taunton.
No.
If I need anything in emergency, I'll use the local village shop. Never use the deli counter. Might use the bread counter in Tesco.
I think we shop the same.
Very similar. Mark and Louise. Maybe one of you can do the other's shop.
BBC 5 Live.